All right, hello everyone. This is the Black Terps Matter Experience, number 3. And we are here live from Stamp Student Union in the Maryland Food Co-op room. Today we are focusing on the history of Black student activism at the United States level, at the DMV level, and at the UMD level. So for today's event, we actually have 2 sections. We're going to be starting out with a letter from a current UMD student named Ty Candace, and she's going to be speaking about a situation that she has dealt with here at the University of Maryland. So, before we go into that and the rest of the presentation today, I was recommended to introduce myself properly because throughout all of the Black Terps Matter Experience like videos and events that we've had so far, I never actually introduced myself. I'm pretty bad at that. So I am Saba Shabaka. I am one of the co-founders of Black Terps Matter, which is an anti-racist coalition here at the University of Maryland. The coalition started on June 25th, 2020, and we started by having a protest, direct action, because we believe as a coalition of students that want to see change, direct action is one of the most successful forms of impact. So we started with a protest, and we worked and worked for a whole year until we graduated, and we pushed for a list of 10 demands, which eventually became 25 demands on behalf of the Black UMD community. And so that's something that I'm really happy that I was able to be a part of, just one of the community members between 2020 and 2021 that made sure to get something done. And we're still pushing for change, and that is one of the reasons why we are making sure to highlight current students, because that's what it's really about. The school would have nothing without the students, and they don't really act like that enough. So that's what we are making sure to do with our platform. So Ty Candace is going to come up, and I'm going to say a little bit more about her situation, and then she's going to be reading her letter. Let's go. Come on, closer. Hey, boo. Hey. All right, so I have Ty Candace here with me. And Ty Candace is a freshman. She is from Baltimore City, Baltimore. And she came to UMD, she just got here last year, and she had an issue in her dorm room that she was living in that really stopped her from being able to function and live college like any normal student should be able to, like literally anywhere. And when I found out about her story, one of her teachers from high school actually reached out to me, and she said that this was a situation that was going on, and she really wanted some assistance for Ty Candace. So as Black Terps Matter, being the anti-racist coalition that we are on UMD's campus, I made sure to reach out to Ty Candace and ask her how I could help and basically what was wrong. So I got put in contact with Ty Candace about 4 months ago in October, right after homecoming actually. And it was really unfortunate to me to hear that all of the people that were supposed to be helping her did not help her. And at first she didn't know if it was because of the color of her skin, but now at this point we can basically confirm. So long story short, what happened was Ty Candace and her roommate, who is also a Black woman, were in their dorm on campus, and in September actually, they started getting woken up in the middle of the night by people making monkey noises outside of their dorm. And it was really confusing to them because they've never done anything to anyone on their hall. They keep to themselves, and they're very kind and great students that focus on their, scholastics. So why this was happening to them, they didn't really understand, but they did try to take it to their resident advisor, who was no help. And they also escalated it to their resident director, who also was not much of a help. So Ty Candace and her roommate had to go through a variety of different departments and offices to try and get some help, and it shouldn't be like that, quite simply. So after months of trying to get help, she finally was able to fight and get moved into a new dorm. And I really want Ty Candace to take a second to read her letter and talk about her situation from her own point of view, because she has a story and it should be amplified. And she'll tell you more about what she thinks everyone should know after the letter as well. So, Ty Candace.
Okay, so hey, I'm Ty Candace, and I'm reading my letter titled Head Always Hide Purposely Unnoticed Tears of a Black Child. She calls for help. All of a sudden, no one is there to listen. They call for help. All of a sudden, ears are opening and smiles are glistening. This cycle was constantly repeated, even if it meant leaving the body of a black child bleeding. Today, as she look around, she see failure, but only in her communities. She see poor people, fiends, and crackheads, but only in her communities. She see police brutality, she see unjust decisions, and fear. And yet, that goes on everywhere, but it always seems so close, so near to, home, close to home, sorry. She sees deaths, poverty, and statistics of the different events happening, but only in her communities. But that's shown by the news and by the people who claim they want to help. What she really sees is people in fear of her succeeding because of the color of her skin. When her eyes open and the day still feels dark because she knows what's to come, leaving a feeling of depression that eventually turns her numb. The way she comprehends and the way her eyes aren't blind so she can't pretend she don't see what's happening around her and peers, or her ears can't hear the monkey noises outside of her dorm that randomly appears. She laughs because if there is no smile behind her fear, she may not be here. She laughs again because she sees excellence after excellence, accomplish at the accomplishment, rise at the rise. It's not about being recognized, which they simply don't realize. She doesn't want pity. She earned her respect. Her situation at a PWI would have been handled sooner if she wore a different disguise. Underneath their white lies the body of people like her. So yes, indeed, she feared for her and her roommates' lives. But even when she felt dead, she always remembered she would leave behind many that cared if she didn't survive this PWI. She was strong and honest because the beautiful woman who raised her. So when tears dropped from her eyes, her mom and God is where she would go to confide. She moves with kindness and begins to take people out like that. The word we is often misconstrued because everyone got their own definition of it. Stop it. They cared about an image. She cared about actions behind an image. Big difference. She is a human, but to them, she was just black or a threat. Again, they need to stop that. The assumptions are real, but they don't want to talk about that. This is just one of the few reasons why she continues to be herself, write her poems, and spill her tea graciously, and be that dope queen mama raised her to be. They say if it ain't directed, it's not respected. But without a name drop, those she are speaking about will receive her message. Those may ask, well, who is she? That black queen? She is me.
Thank you for sharing that, Ty Candace. And thank you for coming here and speaking. I appreciate it, and you sharing your story. So I just want to give you the opportunity to say anything else that you'd like to say about your situation or anything that you want people to know.
I would just say, just to let y'all know, just to be true to y'all, true to who y'all are, no matter what situations y'all put in.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So Ty Candace is a freshman here at Maryland, and she's going to be continuing to persevere, and these situations will not define her, and they will not, period. Like, they will not define her future. They do not define her as an individual, and we will be seeking next steps in this. This is not the end of it, but the purpose of this was really to amplify her story so people know that this is something that is still going on at the University of Maryland and probably colleges all over the country. Blatant disrespect of Black people and Black bodies, and we won't sit quietly about it anymore. And also, we just want to encourage any students that may be dealing with any similar issues or any issues that have to do with harassment or bias or discrimination. Please speak up and please feel empowered, because organizations like Black Terps Matter are here at the University of Maryland, but all across the country there are different Black student unions and different organizations that really want to support students. So please know that you never have to sit and deal with this. Just like Ty Candace was helped out of her situation, you can find help too. So thank you very much for coming and joining us.
Thank y'all.
For sure. So y'all can cut it now.
Thank you so much for
that was
sharing
amazing.
I'm so sorry that
You're such a talented writer. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to Ty Candace's story. Ty Candace is a freshman at the University of Maryland, College Park, but her story resonates across generations and state lines. Honestly, this could have happened to any Black or brown student at any college across the world. So take some time to think about how that made you feel and what you want to do coming away from hearing her story. Next, we'll be talking about the history of Black student activism. Hi everyone, welcome to Black Terps Matter Experience, part 3. This is about the history of student activism on a UMD scale, DMV scale, and did I say UMD? I meant USA. USA, DMV, UMD. And so today I have Kyle with me, and Kyle is a very intelligent young man, and he is going to be helping me with the presentation today. So he's going to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle. I run a small little media platform, media page called
It's not small.
Root Questions.
Go follow root.questions on Instagram.
Everyone's so kind here. Cover political, social issues, so I was lucky enough to be invited by Saba to put together this presentation. We've been working on it, and I think especially with the words of Ty Candace, it's relevant. It's really relevant, and it shows that there might be some changes that happen at a surface level, but the culture that remains from the history of this university, from the history of this country, still here. And the goal of this presentation is to convince you that Black student activism has been the driving force behind the changes that we've seen. So that's what we're gonna try to do here.
Absolutely, and that is the purpose. So Kyle and I are going to be going through this presentation. I'm just going to set it up now. So that's the presentation screen, and sorry y'all, just looking for the presentation. There it is. And all right, cool. And I'm just gonna move this real quick. Sorry if I was showing. All right, now it's on the video. And it's on the screen. So, cool. I'm gonna turn this off too, because we don't need it anymore. All right, we can come up a little closer. Actually, can you come a little closer and just click the button whenever we let you know? All right, so this is the presentation. Student Activism, the Vanguard of Change. And we're gonna be talking about, thanks PSA for mentioning this in your story. We're gonna be talking about Black student activism, the history of it. And I really want to just start this off by saying on the next slide, we're going to be going to the definition of the vanguard. But I want people to understand that we are rebranding the vanguard to describe Black students and Black student activism right now. It means a lot of different stuff. Well, it doesn't mean a lot of different stuff, but it really should mean, should be referred to as like the work that Black students do, because we create the Black people make sure to center the things that we talk about around victims and people most the people that are the most impacted by these issues. And so by continuing to keep the perspectives Black and just having Black people at the table and creating these things, that's really what the future is. So like when you think of the vanguard, think of Black students.
Before we begin, I mean, for the people that are sitting here, can we send them a link so that they can get a view of it too?
Yeah, we can do that.
I think it'd be nice so they could follow along.
For sure.
You can go on live too. You can
Yeah?
text the live.
Okay. Yeah, I have the link right here, so I'm gonna text it to the group chat. I have everyone's text messages. I'm gonna text it to them so they can follow along, because yeah, you guys can. Oh, they see it on the live.
Oh,
But
they
for the
do?
people that don't see it on the live, yeah, that's what this is. This is live streaming what we see.
There's so many connections here. I guess I'm all thrown off. Just I see a lot of eyes staring
Yeah,
back
looking
at me,
at us,
and
not looking
I'm
at
looking at
them.
the screen. I can't tell if I'm just
Nah, we're all good.
just want to make it a little interactive, you know.
So yeah, we're just gonna start right off.
Okay, so yeah, Vanguard. As Saba said, it has a lot of different connotations. It's been used in a lot of different ways. Like there's the Vanguard Bank, that they've used that term to make it that we're leading the financial way. Then there's Vanguard. It's a sort of Marxist-Leninist term of a revolutionary class of people that are leading the way. And in this context, we're defining it as a group of Black students that have led the way in the new development of ideas, of culture, of change. And this all ties back into the universities and students. And you look at all of the major moments of the civil rights era, and you look at their leaders, and it's all connected back to the university, to students, as a place where things are organized, as a place where people are young and have energy, and a place where there are professors and certain senior students who are giving the intellectual ideas that are forming and shaping the movement. So our thesis here and what we're arguing is that without Black students, the change that has happened historically and that's going to happen in the future wouldn't occur, couldn't occur, would not have occurred. So why is Black student activism important at the University of Maryland in particular? Well, if you listen to Ty Candace's words, should be clear to you. But to take it even back to the roots, to the foundation of this university, it was started on a slave plantation. Not being metaphorical or being hyperbolic, it literally was founded on part of a slave plantation. The founder of it, Charles Calvert, he was a slave owner, and there was a big plantation here called the Riverdale Plantation, and the majority of the founding trustees of the university were slave owners. Now back then, the University of Maryland College Park, it wasn't a public university, it was an agriculture school. So there's a little bit of difference there, but that's the roots of this university. Maryland's in a weird place because culturally people don't feel that it's part of the South. It's always kind of been somewhat north, somewhat south. But you just look at this history and you see that it very much has this legacy that it needs to deal with, it needs to grapple with. The University of Maryland can be thought of as a place with a legacy like a University of Alabama. It's really not. It's closer to that. It really is.
Yeah, and we can see this reflected in things like the sports programs, like the football program, where the head coaches, when they are found guilty of things like toxic environments, they can get fired from their positions at UMD and then just go right on and work in the South at colleges like Alabama and other colleges like that. So it's very toxic, and that's it's like honestly mirrors the football toxicity in the culture and the teams is honestly throughout a lot of the different sports at UMD and also in the classroom. So it's not too far. Is there anything else that she wants to mention about this?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the images that I have on this slide. So moving from top left to bottom right, if you're following along, going from the second row is on the left side is just it's a map of College Park near Old Town. If you notice in that area, you have a lot of things named Calvert Road, Calvert Hills, Calvert this, Calvert that. That's named after Charles Calvert, who was the slave owner who owned the plantation around University of Maryland. And right below that yellow and black flag, that's part of the Maryland state flag. That was a flag of the Calvert family, who were descendants of Lord Baltimore, going back to the 1600s. So this imagery is all around us, these names are all around us. When people walk down Calvert Road and they look at the Maryland flag, they don't think about this, they don't think twice about this, but I think it's a reminder that the past wasn't so long ago and that it's still here today. And I wanted to highlight also the story of Adam Plummer, who was a slave on the Riverdale plantation, and he's super significant and just an incredible man because he taught himself how to read and write. He had a large family after the Civil War, where he freed, where he was his own lawyer pretty much and advocated for his freedom, and he bought like a 15-acre estate right in Hyattsville, which is just totally incredible and unheard of.
Yeah, 15 acres.
And he kept a diary that you can now see at the Anacostia Community Museum.
What's his name?
Adam Plummer.
Adam Plummer.
So I just wanted to highlight it to
Yeah, for research purposes. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
Are you gonna say something else other than research purposes?
Yeah, to just show the triumph, that
It is triumphant.
that the tremendous achievement of overcoming that, teaching yourself how to read and write, and then becoming a successful landowner and having your own estate, having your own property. And his I don't know off the top of my head about his whole family descendants, but they were some of the first people at Howard University. They were a family of first. So there's actually like there's a society in Hyattsville that's really dedicated to that family, their legacy. So I just wanted to put it out there. If anyone is really curious about the history in this area, follow up, learn some more. That's why I put it there.
And then we're going to talk more about Lakeland too, so they'll have
Yeah.
opportunities to learn some. Cool. Thank you.
Yes. So as we said before, UMD was a Jim Crow institution, and I think a story that highlights that in a really grotesque way, but also in kind of another inspiring way of overcoming, was that Thurgood Marshall, who went on to become the first Black Supreme Court justice. He was prevented from attending University of Maryland Law School in Baltimore in 1931. He ended up getting his law degree, and several years later he came back with the NAACP, and he sued the UMD Law School to get black students in. And then he also filed a lawsuit against UMD College Park to let the first black student in, who was no, he wasn't. Parra Mitchell was one of them. It was a group of students, but Parra Mitchell was the first black congressman from Maryland.
Yeah, Hiram Woodle was the first Black student at the University of Maryland. And then Elaine Johnson Coates, who's in the bottom right corner on the pictures, she was the first Black woman. So Hiram Woodle, who is right there on the second person over on the bottom row, he's the first Black student here at the University of Maryland. So that's who he fought for. And now we have a dorm, the newest dorm that's built on campus is partially named after him. It's named after like 4 people, I think. But one of the people is Hiram Woodle, and one of the people is Miss Elaine Johnson Coates.
And Miss Elaine Johnson Coates actually spoke at my graduation commencement in 2019, just to show that this is not 150 years ago. This is not 100 years ago. This is people that are still living, like the elders, and this is the legacy of the University of Maryland. While these firsts are important, it didn't change the culture of this campus. It didn't. The legal situation might have changed, but the de facto situation has not. So, next slide.
Yeah, so this slide is a few pictures of moments that are pretty important on campus. I'm going to start with the bottom middle picture. That is actually a protest that happened in 1968. It's the Home Economics Building protest, that's what it's known as. And at that protest, about 500 Black students congregated and protested on the steps of the Home Economics Building, which is now known as Marymount Hall. So it's right at the front of campus, at the bottom left side of McKildon Mall. And yeah, they were protesting because there were 2 young Black women students that were actually barred from participating in an experiment that was going on. So the Black community, students, faculty, and staff, and community members banded together and protested because it was outright racist that these 2 young Black women were not able to join in the experiment, which was a paid study, just because of the color of their skin. And they were actual current students. So this is just an example of the Black community banding together to support students, which is just really beautiful. Do you want to talk about any of the other pictures? I can talk about the last one.
Yeah.
The top right one.
On the left, I wanted to highlight that column. I think it was around 1967, 1968. It was a letter that was published in the Diamondback. And I think the spirit of this letter is really still the spirit of the arguments today. If you look at this column, it says entire campus seems racist, and it just boils down to, well, then show me a racist law. Or it boils down to, well, if the white students got together and they formed a white student union, wouldn't that be racist? And it really misses the key variable here, which is power. Who has the power? And what is the context that this is occurring in? So I wanted to highlight this just to show that, the arguments and the counter arguments that people were making in 1968, copy paste. It's what people are still leaning on in 2022. This guy is saying the whole campus is racist. Well, how could that be? I'm not racist, But meanwhile, if you look at the bottom right, there were incidents where people were, spraying swastikas on the Black Cultural Center, and then you look at the image on the top right, what happened to Sergeant Collins.
Yeah, so I could talk a little bit more about that. So with Lieutenant Richard Collins III, he had a very unfortunate situation in a couple years back where he was a student at Bowie State University, and he came to UMD for a night out with a few of his friends that are from UMD. And trigger warning, he was actually murdered on campus by a UMD student who was a current senior named Sean Urbanski, who actually was a student at UMD that was getting his tuition paid for because his mother worked at the school. So he did not have to pay for his tuition at all or anything, and he went out of his way to murder a young Black person who I guess he thought was a UMD student. On a Friday night. And so after that happened, Black students on campus were really looking for justice for Lieutenant Richard Collins III, and we were made promises that were not kept by past presidents, like President Lowe, who was president for 10 years. He said that we were going to see a physical space of memoriam like for Lieutenant Richard Collins, and we did not see that in his tenure. And so now we have President Pines, the next president. It's been about a year, almost 2 years into his tenure, and we haven't seen a physical space for him either. So, from him either, I mean, for Lieutenant Richard Collins III. So, Black Terps Matter as an anti-racist coalition has connected with his family, and we are consistently pushing to make sure that everything that they want to see and what they consider justice for him gets to happen. So, in the time that we've been organizing, since June of 2020, in August, there was actually a coalition that was formed at the school between Bowie State and the University of Maryland in his honor, and we're hopeful that there will be more recognition for his legacy on UMD's campus. There is currently a scholarship that exists for ROTC students, but we want, like I said, a physical space on campus, so that's what we continue to push for. And yeah, so that was a racist incident, long story short, and we want to continue amplifying situations like that so they don't happen again. But we have a history of racism on campus. So we can go to the next slide. And so this is a little bit of information about Lakeland. Kyle can explain more about it. I just want to point some things out on this map. So for people that don't know, this is the University of Maryland area on a map. We are just a couple miles away from DC's eastern border. So this street that you see right here is Route 1, which if you continue going south on Route 1, it turns into Rhode Island Avenue, and which is in Northeast DC. So the University of Maryland College Park is located in Prince George's County, which is affectionately known as PG County, which is a predominantly Black county as of right now, yet that is not reflected in the Black student population at the University of Maryland. Since they started letting Black students in 1951, shout out to Hiram Whittle, they have consistently kept the numbers very low, most likely on purpose, but that's a conversation for another day. So at the University of Maryland, while it sits in Prince George's County, it has about like 11% Black population right now, I believe. And but before the University of Maryland really came and started growing out, there was a Black community that existed here called the Lakeland community. And Kyle, you can say a little bit more about the Lakeland community.
Yeah, why I think Lakeland is important is because it was a community in the well, it's still a community, but in the 60s and 70s, there were around hundreds of homes that were torn down, and the deal was that they were supposed to be compensated for this, and they were supposed to be given accommodation. The compensation that they received, oftentimes it would come late, or it wouldn't be enough for them to relocate. So they tore these people's homes down, and the City of College Park undertook different projects. Now, this was part of a wider policy that was going on in the country called urban renewal projects. And this happened here in College Park. It happened with connection with the University of Maryland. And right now, the Lakeland community, there are a ton of student apartments there. I think Parkside is one of them. So when you see students, scooting around on their scooters right here in Lakeland, they're going to be gone in 3 years. They're going to be gone in 4 months. They have no understanding of the disruption that happened to this area, and the university hasn't really come out and acknowledged that, and they just keep building more luxury student apartments. They removed the rent cap, the City of College Park. So I think that if there's any neighborhood in College Park where the students are living that you want to study to get more insight about the politics and the economics of what's happened in this area, I think Lakeland is a place to start, or the place to really look into it. And on the bottom right, I just showed, wish I could get a photo of the metro station. But the metro station is an example of decisions throughout our country, and just right here in College Park, of conscious decisions that were made as part of this, urban renewal philosophy, this racist philosophy. The reason that the metro station is so far from the center of campus is because they wanted to keep people from DC out, which is, code word for black people. They wanted to keep them away from the center of the University of Maryland campus. So if you ever wondered why is the Green Line station, why is it so far away from campus, that's why. So when you walk around College Park, when you walk around parts of this country, there's a reason for the placement of things. There's a reason for the naming of roads. It wasn't handed down by God. It didn't just happen that way. A lot of times these were very conscious political decisions that were made.
That's a fact. And another thing that I want to say about Lakeland before we move on to the next slide is that it was a fully developed, independent black community. It had a school, it had a recreation center, it had all these different parts of the black community that we always say that we want to uplift and we want people to be independent and have their own stuff. Lakeland had all of that, and the gentrification that happened in the city of College Park took all of that away. So we really need to all do our part to make sure to support black people in getting their independency.
So we've touched on this, I think, earlier, but I wanted to use the word intelligentsia, not only because it's a cool word,
Thanks.
but because it describes the intellectual force behind a movement. And if you look at all of the lawsuits that beat the Jim Crow laws, that got the legal situation changed, if you look at the demonstrations that happened, if you look at the major movements that happened, like the Freedom Riders and the Freedom Summer, they were all spearheaded and conceptualized, brainstormed by black students. You'd be hard pressed to find a movement, to find an organization that didn't have some roots in a HBCU, that didn't have some roots in organizing students. Like some notable organizations are the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Congress of Racial Equality. And I think that's an important part of the story, yeah.
Yeah, all of these student-led, black-led organizations pushed all through the 60s and 70s. They were very fearless. A lot of them got arrested, icons like John Lewis. He was getting arrested as young as 15, 17 when he was in college, and before when he was in high school. So it's really on the shoulders of giants that we continue to do this work, but I will say they were going very hard in the 60s and 70s. So you can see that statistic towards the bottom of the screen. It says in 1965, there was 200,000 black students enrolled in American higher education institutions. And less than 10 years later, there was 800,000 black students enrolled in American higher education institutions. So the pushing and the pressure that they applied in the 60s came through and was shown in the 70s, and I think that should be seen as a note for all of us to continue pushing, because we have no idea what the impact of what we're doing right now is going to look like in 5-10 years.
Yeah. And I wanted to say that that the black students did have their white allies, but kind of the memory that has been corrupted has been that it was like a majority. These were very small percentage of students who were riding buses to Mississippi and standing and getting arrested. I showed on the bottom right Freedom Summer activists. Those were the most famous ones. All three of them were killed by Ku Klux Klan members, and there were white allies who were supporting, who were doing what they could, but the public memory has really been corrupted where now everyone kind of wants to take credit for it. But I think one place you can see that is public opinion polling on Martin Luther King Jr. Before he was killed, he was like 70% unpopular. And now, you ask, and he was the most peaceful leader of the civil rights movement, obviously. And now when you poll people, it's like 95% approve him, and everyone says you should be like MLK, but when he was alive, he was widely unpopular. So I just wanted to kind of point out that role of like, what role did white allies play in all this? They were a minority, for sure.
It's a great point. It's a great point. There's a lot of unnamed Black women that had their hands in the movement that will probably never get their credit. So shout out to the Black women activists. And yeah. So you can go to the next one. Thank you. So yeah, this is just to continue on the statistics from the last page. In 1965, there were no African American studies, institutes, programs, or departments on any college campuses across America. And less than 10 years later, in 1973, there were 1,000 colleges that had African American centers, institutes, programs, or departments. So the really cool part about this is the bottom part. In the same time segment, the University of Maryland established the Black Student Union, the Nimburu Cultural Center, the Black Explosion newspaper, the Office of Multi-Ethnic Student Education, the Department of African American Studies, and the Black Faculty and Staff Association. And I'm really happy to report that all of those still exist right now. Like, all of those different programs and departments are still active, and they're supporting Black students right now. And so again, shout out to the movement leaders of the 60s and 70s for establishing these institutions and programs, because without them, like, personally, as a Black student, I don't know if I would have been able to matriculate through the school like I did. So every single one of these programs was very necessary, and I just appreciate the things that people have done in the past so I can continue to activate and learn. So you can go to the next one. I can do this. Okay, cool. So this is some information about direct actions and that have happened throughout the last couple of years. So the next two slides are going to be more of a timeline. And so if you're watching this recording, feel free to pause it and read through. We're going to be highlighting a few of them, especially the ones that are pictured on the right. So starting at the top, between the 1930s and 40s, there are Howard students that organized civil rights protests against lynching, and they organized sit-ins throughout Washington, D.C. It goes on to explain a little bit more, but there were basically different HBCUs across the DMV, like Morgan State, which is towards Baltimore, and there's University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which is like on the eastern shore of Maryland, more towards Salisbury, a little bit further out. But these HBCUs, that their students, Black students, led the conversations about racism since the beginning of the conversations. And what we saw a lot of the time was these students, they were so fed up that they would have demonstrations and direct actions on their campus, and it would spill over to other campuses, and students would hear about it from schools like UMD, and they would organize actions to coincide with the other actions that were going on across the country. So that is one way that direct actions really spread like wildfire throughout the different years. But you can add on.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to note when we look at this history on the direct action is, if you notice what was successful and what's worked, it's when these students would shut down business as usual. It's when they would physically seize administration buildings. It's when they would obstruct things. It's when they would obstruct money and capital. That's when the university wanted to listen, when they wanted to make changes on campus. Now, obviously, it's hard to shut down business of usual of an entire society, of an entire country, to make changes happen. But when we look at these years, particularly in the 60s, these student activists were incredibly effective at changing things on their campus because they would shut things down. They wouldn't just, make a march. They would go in buildings and say, make us leave. And there'd be thousands of them.
Yeah, and there's a slide a little bit more about this later, but one of the points, great point that you made was that they are very unlikely to do a mass arrest of many students at once because it's terrible PR. It's probably multiple reasons, but that's one of the biggest reasons is because they don't want it to look bad in pictures, because like schools and like larger institutions are scared. They're really just scared. They don't want to be embarrassed, and they don't want like information to come out on a large scale. So we as students just have to use the resources that we have, which are most likely information, as our weapon or tools, so we can be successful in what we're trying to get. So just pointing out some of the successful direct actions that are on here. In 1968, in March, Howard students seized the administration building successfully, shutting down school in demand of more African American courses and curriculum. So they were successful with that, and that was in March. 1968 was a very interesting year for Black students, I will say. Just as an overview, that's the same year that the Black Student Union was formed here on UMD's campus. It was actually formed out of CORE, which is the Congress of Racial Equality. That was something that literally there was only 4 Black students here at Maryland that were a part of that, and they said, we're gonna switch our name, we're gonna call ourselves the Black Student Union. I heard about this from Bobby McLeod, which is actually the first president of the Black Student Union. I heard this story from him firsthand. And he said, we're a small group, people don't really know what CORE is, so we're gonna call ourselves the Black Student Union. And then once all these people found out about this organization calling themselves the Black Student Union, they wanted to find out more. They're just nosy, so they joined it. And that's the power of rebranding, I just have to say. So students at the University of Maryland in 1968, that is when they really started organizing. They had organized before, but that's when the large protest happened. That's when that home economics building protest happened in October of 1968. And at the convocation ceremony in April, the Black students seized the microphone at the convocation ceremony and read out a list of 10 demands. So that's like an example of direct action. It's not really waiting for someone to give you the mic or tell you that you're invited to speak, but it's taking the mic and doing things that may be uncomfortable for the greater good. And so then the last one says in 1969, 200 Black students at UMD walked out of the convocation ceremony and protest. So that's just one year after the other direct action. And we can see things like this, direct actions like this lead to impact. Like in 1968, there was only 484 Black students at UMD. And just a couple years later, in 1971, there was 1,231 Black students at UMD. So this direct action really put a lot of pressure on the school to make changes. And an increase in Black student enrollment is something that student activists at UMD have always been asking for ever since the first Black student. We had to fight for the first Black student, and we are literally still fighting here to this day in 2022 to get more Black students. So it's history, but it's also our current day reality. So yeah, you can.
Yeah. This is just a wall of fame to kind of prove the point even further of major figures, major leaders in the civil rights movement. That they have their roots in HBCUs, they have their roots in universities. One of the only exceptions is Malcolm X. He was brilliant, but he didn't go to a university. And I did want to include Aaron McGruder, just because I wanted to find someone from.
Oh wait, I love him. Did I tell you that?
No, you didn't.
That's my favorite UMD alum. Like, I kid you not. That's so funny that she added him.
Well, it must have been my intuition. So.
Oh my gosh, Aaron McGruder, if you ever watch this, I love you. I just want y'all to know. I don't know if everyone knows, but he's a person that created the Boondocks and other things as well. But that's one of my favorite TV shows of all time is the Boondocks. So, shout out to Aaron McGruder. Sorry, continue.
That's all. Just wanted to show this as evidence of the whole thesis of this presentation here of Black students as the vanguard leading the way and as the intelligentsia that are shaping the culture, shaping the theory, shaping the practice, and moving things forward.
Yes, shout out to all of these amazing people. I do personally have to give a shout out to Congressman John Lewis. He is one of my biggest inspirations as a college student activist. All the work that he put in as a college student activist, really, I literally walk in his footsteps. So shout out to him, rest in peace to John Lewis, and rest in peace to all of the icons that are on this list that we lost, and more life to all of the icons that are still on here. So, yeah. So to go into this slide, it's a little bit more of a timeline, more recently, starting in the 1980s and 1990s, about other direct actions that have happened on campus, at other campuses, on HBCU campuses. So there was another occupation of the administration building in 1989 on Howard's campus. And if you look down just a little bit, again in 2018, there was occupation of the administration building. And then again in 2021. So that is 3 occupations within 20 years? Wait, is that 30 years? 31, 2? I'm not good at math, y'all, sorry. Yeah, in about 35 years, there was 3 different occupations of the administration building by Howard University students. That shows that there's something seriously wrong with their administration and how they're administrating the school. And so they've had issues from financial aid disbursements not going out right to housing situations where there were a lot of people on campus that didn't get housing, which is also something that people at UMD had to deal with. So it's crazy how these things intersect. Just kidding, they're not really crazy. We know how these things intersect because that's what they're built to do. But yeah, and then most recently they were protesting over housing issues. A lot of the dorms on campus had mold and just different issues, a lot of different issues with the AC, and kids were actually getting sick and the school wasn't doing anything about it. So just last year, about 5 months ago, they had one of the longest occupations on campus at the A building through the Blackburn takeover. If anyone's interested in that, you guys can look up the hashtag Blackburn takeover, and you can find out more information about Howard's recent student activists speaking up. Just to point out a couple other things on here, in 1990, Morgan State students occupied their administration building and shut down the campus in demand for better funding, and that was actually successful. So we see a lot of the time that when students come together and they decide to act on behalf of the greater good, take it seriously, and especially deliver demands, because power concedes nothing without a demand, we see change on campus. So that's something that we just want to make sure, you can go to the next one, rings through and to this, that again, when students organize direct actions on campus, change happens.
It does happen, and Black students have been really good at that they understand, just the example of Howard, they understand that putting a bunch of tents right outside the administration building, that's messing up their money. That's a horrible look for the university, and it's a form of direct action that is affecting the business as usual scenario. If they had a petition and they got a bunch of signatures saying to change housing, the administrators are gonna look at that, and they're gonna, they might release a statement or they might just ignore it. But when you do direct action that hurts the pocketbooks, when it hurts the profit of universities, because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to learn and do research, but the people making decisions, they're really about making more money and raising more money. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, one of the biggest takeaways when you look at history of activism and social change movements, is that the direct action that shuts down the business as usual, it takes the most courage, but it's also the most effective, the most successful. And Black students at HBCUs, they really do it. They do it all the time. And like you said, just 4 times in the past 30 years.
Yeah. That's crazy. It shows that there's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of issues all over at a lot of different campuses. and UMD is or was known as a protesting school. That's like what we are known as, but I still think that there could have been more protests, and I think that there should be more protests. So I agree with everything that he said, and I just really want to encourage students, if they have any issues on their campus, if they feel like they're not being heard by their administration, if they're seeing recurring issues over and over again, whether that be racial discrimination or otherwise. On UMD, there's a big issue of sexual assault, and the students on campus talk about it sometimes, but off of the campus, people don't know enough about it, and that's how these things continue to go on. So organizations like Preventing Sexual Assault that host events like Occupy McKilden, which honestly just take up space. It takes up space in the middle of campus to amplify messages from students. More events like that are needed. More events that bring out people that are not a part of the community to talk about things that aren't usually talked about. We need to continue doing that, and we need to continue supporting that, because that's the future. We're on a college campus so we can get a plethora of different experiences and perspectives, and if we are not constantly activating and constantly having these events, we're not really doing college justice, because it's really about the opportunity, and college students have more opportunity than anyone else in the entire world to activate and make a difference and make an impact. So I think it's our duty as college students and anyone that's a part of a college community. Like Kyle and I are both alums. We're not students, but we took time to make sure to give out this presentation and give out this knowledge that we had, because we think that it can potentially educate people in the future, and people can use this information to go on and do great things, like organized protests. So all that being said, that is the end of the presentation, and we do have a couple questions for Kyle to answer, so I'm just gonna take down this presentation and then we can get into that part. So yeah, this is the conclusion, and then if there's anyone that has any questions, y'all can ask the questions, but if not, we can just go to the next section. Okie doke. And I'm gonna move this. 1 second, Kyle. You remember the questions?
I think I forgot to study them, but I think I'll be able to.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask
do a
you,
little
so you don't have to
improv.
remember too bad. But and let me give you this. Can you go off my phone? Actually, she has that angle. You could just start in a second. Okay. So you can start. All right. So this is the Black Terps Matter Experience 3. We just finished our fantastic presentation on the history of student activism on a UMD scale, United States level, and DMV wise. And now I have some questions for Kyle, because he has an amazing platform called Root Questions. And yeah, I just have some questions about that, because you're obviously like a wealth of knowledge, like you have all of this information. And so like, yeah, my first question is really like, how did you come to receive all this information? Like, what did you do to be in the spaces to get all this information that you know about like student activism?
Since I was like maybe 3 or 4 years old, I've always been fascinated by history, by politics, and it's just something that I've kind of, just fell into. You know how life can kind of just be that you kind of wander around, you find out what you're good at, and then after the fact it looks like it was something linear, but really it was just me trying different things, me reading a lot, and just being consistent and researching, like I learned so much in preparation for this presentation, and I think you have to sit down and you have to be curious and find some joy in it, which I do. I guess maybe that's what is interesting to me is to learn about people and figures of history and so I'll just sit down and read about it for hours and hours, and able to put it together, make some posts, and hopefully give out some information.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna ask you to tell us some more about exactly like how you put the post together and put out information. But I did want to know, like, I thought that was interesting what you said about like you find the joy in it. And so I feel the same way about research. Like, of course, I enjoy researching things that I care about. Things that I don't care about so much, I don't really. So I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. Like, what made you, if there is anything that made you feel like passionate about the stuff that we're talking about, or if it's just something that you started liking over time that you started growing up.
So my dad was he was an antique dealer, so that just means he would deal with a lot of old stuff. So I would see like a lamp from 1903, when I was 4, and it kind of put it together for me, like, oh wow, like the past, and it just became this sort of fascination. So I don't know if that is what Kindle did, but what I really find interesting about history is that sometimes, like that column that we had in the presentation, you can find little artifacts that make something click in your head where you understand why things are the way they are today, and you can understand that these are not old debates, these are not old aspects of the human condition, they're things that just keep occurring, and history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So that's kind of what always like kept me to just be fascinated and want to learn more, because I feel that when I learn more about history, I learn a little bit more about how the world works, and that all intersects with politics, with economics. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of perspective of like why you're interested in this so much. Super cool. So yeah, back to what you were saying about putting this information together once you do the research and putting it out. So not a lot of people do that. Not a lot of people, some people do the research. Most people won't do the research, most people will not do the research. But some people do the research, but you decide to like go on and take the extra step and put it together in a way that's consumable for people, and also publish it. So tell us a little bit about that and your platform and why you decided to take that extra step to publish the information that you research about.
Yeah, well, for starters, I'm definitely like strange. So
You're a strange person.
I'm
okay,
strange.
cool. I respect it.
Like, I started off doing this project with like 12 other people. We were all on the same page, and then when it came down to, okay, let's make a well-researched 10-slide post about the geopolitics of Ukraine, it's like, oh, I'm busy, I got things to do, and I completely understand that. So my process is pretty much try to break it down, try to ask questions, and be ready to see that it's a lot more complicated than you might have thought at first. So if you really want to make something that is going to have any use or is going to have anything interesting to say, then be ready to read a lot, be ready to learn a lot, and always ask like the what, the when, the how, the why, and be ready to get like lost in your own confusion. You should kind of welcome it. I think that's kind of been my process, is to just try to break it down into question formats, and be ready to spend 8-9 hours making a post. There are a lot of accounts that just like recycle memes, or they
Repost and
repost.
Don't give their own original content.
Yeah, or like post tweets, and
Which is very
I
easy
think that's
to do.
cool. I think that's there's fun in that, but if you really want to give some knowledge that's gonna help people win more arguments or persuade more people, I think is more important, not winning
And
arguments.
retain information. Too.
Then I think you gotta be ready to be confused. You gotta be ready to be researching. You gotta be ready to ask questions.
Okay, great. Well, that's a very, very good point. And there's a lot of like responsibility that comes with being the person that gives out that information too. So just as a quick question, like, do you like just like fact checking, like how important do you take that, and is there any like resources that you like to specifically use, or you just like look stuff up on Google?
So when it comes to facts that might have a more subjectivity, I like to hedge and use words like some, or use words that show that there's some debate around it, or indicate that there's debate around it. So on top of just like basic fact checking of, checking if the source is legitimate, checking if this study, if the study that I'm using, if it hasn't been like debunked by other studies, or cross-checking on top of doing all of that, if I'm really diving into something that has like a wide range of opinions, I like to indicate that, and show that there is some debate. So that's kind of been my approach to fact checking, is to cross-check, to make sure that everything that I'm giving and like the sources that I'm giving have some credibility, some legitimacy, and especially if it's a topic that's controversial, and that there's like wide debate around it, is to tell people that. Yeah.
Cool. So so we're both, like I said, UMD alum. I recently graduated in 2021. You graduated in 2019. And so I wanted to ask, how has being a student or a former student, how has that helped you with your media platform, root.questions? Y'all can all follow it on Instagram at root.questions if you're interested. But yeah, how has being a student really helped you shape that and to be what it is today?
So there were courses that I took. Obviously, I was a government student. There were courses that I took that reading political philosophy, I think really helped. So beyond just the academics, though, when I was involved in student protests, I think that really shaped my outlook and the sort of content that I wanted to make. For some context, like the big student activism that I was involved in was actually trying to save the room that we're in now. Used to be a student cooperative that existed for like 40 years. It was a place where students were worker owners who controlled the means of production, meaning that they made the sandwiches, they made the decisions about payments, they made the decisions about what prices they charged, they made all of the decisions like a co-op does. And the university shut them down because they had a problem with their finances, even though the university will fund hundreds of millions for a football program for a half-empty stadium, but that's beyond the point. So
where are the people?
So my experience with that, and seeing how there's always a disconnect between the rhetoric of fearless ideas and what they're actually willing to put money behind, seeing that disconnect between rhetoric and just capitalism, that really shaped my outlook of the sort of content I want to make. Is that I want to break through rhetoric, I want to break through headlines, and I want to give people like material analysis of what's shaping the issues. That there's always follow the money.
Follow the money.
So that just really shaped my experience beyond just the political philosophy, like reading Marx or reading people like Locke, reading that sort of stuff, but also just in actual practice of seeing the reactions from the university, and that's kind of what shaped what I do.
For sure. Well, shout out to the Maryland Food Co-op. He said we got to shout. I was about to let you bring it in.
I don't know who.
Shout out to the food co-op.
The yellow on purple. We were talking about this before.
It's questionable.
I love the comrades at the co-op, but the design was kind of a little bit of a downfall here.
So shout out to the comrades, nonetheless. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. The old Maryland Food Co-op room. So definitely thank you for taking some time to mention that. It's something that we've been trying to talk about every time that we've had one of these Black Terps Matter events. And so now I have the last question. We connected through social media. Kyle and I actually met each other on Instagram. And it is something that not a lot of our peers are on. Like, I don't know if y'all know, but at the University of Maryland, it's a lot of people that are not on Twitter or on Instagram. And I don't even know if that's a normal thing. I don't know what's going on around all the colleges in the country, but just at UMD, not everyone is on social media, which is fine. Social media is a little bit of a toxic place anyways. So I wanted to ask you, given that not everyone is on social media, what do you think is the future of communicating with each other? Because we know, like, as activists, it's really important to have platforms that we can communicate this information and knowledge through. So I just want to know what you think is kind of like the future of communicating with each other.
I think maybe in person. I don't know.
That's not a bad point. We've been in the context. We've been in the pandemic for about 2 years now. 2 years, 3, is it 2 or 3?
Yeah, it might come back, in-person communication.
So it's been a while since we've had in-person. Yeah.
If the metaverse doesn't, well, who knows?
Yeah, shout out to
But more serious, I think that if you can make sort of little infographics or pamphlets or memes, and you could text them to people, you can show them to people, you can print them out. If there's something that you see happening that you want to get some information about, make an infographic, make a pamphlet, and put it in places. Like if you see an issue that's happening in a university or a workspace, making that sort of content, it doesn't have to go on Instagram. If you just stick it in a bathroom stall, or if you stick it in a hallway, or if you stick it in a dorm room, these sorts of things can really leave an impression on people. So if people aren't on social media and there's a message that you want to get out and it is affecting something locally, this sort of agitation can really be effective.
Definitely. I think that's a great point. Different types of marketing other than anything that has to do with being online or on social media is a great point. And that might be what we see coming out of you a little bit more, just more long form stuff outside of social media.
Yeah.
Right? Some video content. And that is what my opinion of what the future is going to look like. People getting away from such short form content, tweets, and just very quick tidbits of information, and being more open to sitting down and taking in like independent films and just short films or other types of content to get full messages out instead of just headlines and things like that. So hopefully that's what the future will look like. And speaking of the future, that is what the next event is going to be about. So thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
For speaking with us today, taking us through the presentation, the amazing presentation, answering a few questions. If y'all have any questions or you want to connect with Kyle, feel free to hit him up and hit up the platform, follow the platform on Instagram at root.questions. And is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Just that I'm very happy to be a guest here and just honored, humbled, and all that, and I'm glad that we got this out.
I am too. I'm very glad that this happened. So, this is the Black Terps Matter Experience, the third one. We talked about the history of student activism on a countrywide basis, at a DMV level and on the UMD-centric level. We also had a conversation with Kyle about his roots in activism and why he chose to create a media platform to get out the true root causes of these issues and things like that. And that's the Black Terps Matter Experience. So tune in next Tuesday. It'll be the fourth and final installation of the Black Terps Matter Experience. We'll be talking about the future of Black student activism and Black student college life. We'll be having the CEP come in, which means we'll be having actual students, actual Black students from middle school and high school come out and talk about what they want to see the future to look like. So make sure to follow us on Instagram to stay connected if you have any questions at Black Terps Matter. My personal Instagram, you can find me on Instagram and at Twitter at Saba Speaking, and that's the Black Terps Matter Experience. So thanks for tuning in. Feel free.
And yeah, bye. Thank you. And then